As Margot Robbie once said,
There are two kinds of people in this world. There are the people who are obsessed with Peaky Blinders, and then there's the people who haven't seen Peaky Blinders.
I happen to fall squarely in the former category. I have watched this show since it first came to Netflix all the way back in 2014, and I have waited breathlessly for every new season since then. I firmly believe, and I will die on this hill, that Peaky Blinders is one of the greatest television shows ever made, full stop. So, when Netflix announced that it would be making a film to wrap up Tommy Shelby's story, I was on that hype train faster than Abed when he found out that Cape was getting its own TV show.
6 seasons and a movie!
So, imagine my disappointment when I sat down to watch Peaky Blinders, The Immortal Man, and I got a story that was 50% recap, 30% aimless action, 20% setup for a new series, and 100% underwhelming.
Dusty black coat with a red right hand.
First things first, there is nothing technically wrong with this movie. The cast all turn in solid performances, it's beautifully shot, what plot there is written well, and I do think there are some great ideas on display. But this movie should have been another season of the TV show. There's no way around it. Every single subplot, of which there are several, has been boiled down to the barest Cliff Notes version of itself. And in an IP that has leaned so heavily on its subplots to route back to the main story to deliver emotional catharsis, it leaves the film feeling very anemic. For example, we discovered that Ada, Tommy Shelby's sister, has become an MP, which I believe is like a state representative in the US. Let me know down in the comments if I'm wrong. If this had been a season of the TV show, we would have had time to come to grips with this. We would have seen her working with other politicians. We would have had the political machinations of a government that is desperately trying to maintain its war footing. We would have seen her working as an MP. What we got was a few statements that yes, she is working in government against the fascists, and no, she is no longer working for the blinders. There's no back and forth, there are no shades of gray, just accept it and move on. Additionally, we've got the guy that Tim Roth's character is working with, who's on screen for about a minute and a half before being shot and killed. We've got the Tommy Zelda subplot, which is brushed over. We've got Duke now running the blinders, which is heavily glossed over. And then we've got the whole counterfeiting operation, which is touched on, but never fully comes to fruition. As an analog, let's take a quick look at Season 3, with Tommy's attempt to stop the British government from entering the Bolshevik Revolution. We've got Tommy himself, trying to make a buck. We've got his interactions with the exiled Russian aristocracy. We've got his time with Section D and their pederast priest. And we've got Grace's death, along with Tommy's efforts to run the blinders. All of it beautifully written, all of it in-depth, all of it fully explained. The Immortal Man has about the same number of subplots, but because it's a 2-hour movie, there is no room for any of them to even think about breathing. I do not deny that there is a brilliant story in here. You just can't see it because you're rushing by at 1,000,000 miles an hour. One of the things that Peaky Blinders has always done spectacularly is its cast, and this movie is no exception. They've brought in top-tier talent like Barry Keoghan, Tim Roth, and Rebecca Ferguson to try and lend weight to the story, and in that regard, they do the best they can. Barry Keoghan as Duke Shelby turns in a great performance. I 100% believe that he was Tommy Shelby's kid, but as I've already said, he needed room to breathe, to develop. Introduced in the final season of the show, I always felt like the character of Duke was shoehorned in at the last second to give Tommy another emotional strand to tug on. So, when there's a 6-year time jump to the movie, and all of a sudden he's running the blinders, the cognitive whiplash was harsh to say the least. Rebecca Ferguson does an admirable job with what she's given, but my issue is that she feels more like a Bond girl, rather than, and I'm saying this completely earnestly here, one of the strong female characters that this series is known for. On top of that, she looked and felt strangely out of place. Her clothes, her hair, her manner, it all felt much too modern. Almost like the character was written in very late in the development process to act as connective tissue to get Tommy and Duke in the same room. Tim Roth, who is always a pleasure to watch work, desperately tries to flesh out the character of John Beckett, but he's given so little to work with that there isn't much to be done. You can feel him trying to sink his teeth into every scene he's in, trying to inject a personality where there is almost none. Honestly, he could have joined the long line of expertly written Peaky Blinders villains, because the foundation was there. There was just no time to build anything on top of it. And, as always, Cillian Murphy wears the character of Tommy Shelby like he wears those perfectly tailored suits. Flawlessly. As with the others, however, he's just not given enough to do. The first 45 minutes of screen time have him in a holding pattern, waiting for the plot to stop by and pick him up. Once it does, he's every bit the terrifying anti-hero we've come to know and love, but there's only so many shots you can take of him standing in the English countryside looking forlorn. The rest of the cast enters and exits as needed, without much in the way of stuff to do, and the plot's conclusion feels terribly slapdash. Instead of treading new ground, it relies on tropes we've seen previously in the show, not the least of which is Tommy being forced to literally tunnel his way to victory. I may be beating a dead horse at this point, but every single complaint I got with this movie all comes back to the fact that there was just no time. Arthur Shelby, for example, who is best described in my opinion as the heart and soul of the gang, is exited ignominiously, without Paul Anderson even getting the chance to appear on screen to say goodbye. What happens to Arthur could have been a parallel main plot to the story, told in flashbacks to really drive home the why behind Tommy's self-imposed exile. As it stands, the audience is left to call on their memories of Arthur in a search for emotional resonance, rather than being reintroduced to him. It's a damn shame because I always felt that his character perfectly represented the emotional state of the gang at any given point in the Blinders story. To see him exited with such little fanfare really kinda hurt to watch. Alfie Solomons is missing entirely, which I understand from a technical perspective, but when you've got a character that runs a Jewish street gang, and your plot is about the Nazis trying to collapse the British economy, you really feel it when he's missing from the proceedings. Plus, Tom Hardy gave us some of the greatest moments in the show, bar none, and his presence was sorely missed, as was, and as always will be, Helen McCrory as Polly Gray. Her performance as the grounding rod to Tommy Shelby's lightning was integral to the show, and while I understand the necessity of carrying on, the show has always been lesser for her passing. I can't help but wonder how things would have ended had she been able to finish her turn as the iconic Polly, and what the movie would have looked like. Normally, when a piece of media fails to live up to expectations, there's usually someone you can pin it on. A director that doesn't know what they're doing, a writer that never should have sat down at the keyboard in the first place, an actor that phones in their performance, or a studio that held the reins far too tightly. With The Immortal Man, all I can come up with is that the blame rests squarely on the shoulders of whoever thought making this story into a movie was a good idea. This was a season of television, and that's all there is to it. It could have been a great one, maybe even a spectacular one, if only it had been given the room to grow. And with a spin-off show currently in development, I have a sneaking suspicion that this movie was always meant to simply bridge the gap between an old cast and a new one. At the end of the day, Peaky Blinders: The Immortal Man is an inoffensive ending to one of the greatest television shows of all time. And the greatest compliment that I can pay it is this: it made me want to binge watch the original series all over again. Anyway, that's all I've got for you this time, so if you could do me a favor and hit the like and subscribe buttons, I'd really appreciate it. Every little bit really helps me out. Also, head down to the comments and let me know if there's anything you guys would like to see me cover in the future. And while you're at it, go ahead and take a look at the other videos on my channel, or hit up my website to see my blog and maybe check out one of my books on Amazon. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.